Let's start off at the quarterback position with the starts and Justin Fields. I mean, the Cowboys are basically a fantasy cheat code for quarterbacks. Every quarterback they faced this year has scored at least 24 fantasy points, and two have had at least 29 points. So Justin Fields, coming off a big game against Miami, is a very good start, especially with 4 teams on a bye. I also like Drake Maye this week. I mean, he's been fantastic for fantasy managers. 19 plus points 3 times in 4 games. He's averaging over 21 points per game. And I like him against Buffalo. Their defense is giving up right around 17 points per game to quarterbacks. They also have allowed 3 quarterbacks to rush for at least 49 yards against them. And we all know Drake Maye loves to run with the football. So start Drake Maye. Among the quarterbacks I'm sitting this week, Bo Nix. He's coming off a huge game, but that was against the Bengals. Now he's got to play a road game against the Philadelphia Eagles. In their last 11 games at Lincoln Financial Field, the Eagles defense has allowed an average of 12.1 points per game to quarterbacks, so Bo Nix is a super flex play at best. And the same goes for Trevor Lawrence, who I told you to sit last week. He had 11.7 fantasy points. His numbers have not been great in 3 of his first 4 games of the season, and the Chiefs have allowed just 4 touchdown passes in their first 4 games. And overall, quarterbacks are averaging 14.4 points per game against them, so sit Trevor Lawrence in traditional fantasy leagues. Let's move on to the running backs and Quinshon Judkins. I mean, listen, he has become the lead back in Cleveland. Last week, 58% touch share. That is absolutely huge. And he's really been matchup proof. I mean, look at his numbers against good defenses like the Packers and the Lions. And keep in mind, the Vikings gave up over 31 fantasy points to Kenneth Gainwell last week. So Quinshon Judkins needs to be in your starting lineup. And so does Cam Skattebo. And I get it, 13 points last week. It's okay. But look at his touch share. 48% with Tyrone Tracy banged up. And I love the matchup this week against the Saints. Their defense has allowed 3 running backs to beat them for at least 18 fantasy points in their first 4 games. So Skattebo is a very good play this week. Among the running backs, I'd fade, and chances are you probably have to play these guys because the buys are here. But Chase Brown has been a shell of himself without Joe Burrow. His numbers have been awful in the last 3 weeks, and he's got Detroit this week in what could be a negative game script. The Lions defense has held Josh Jacobs, DeAndre Swift, and Derrick Henry to 38.6 combined points. So Chase Brown could have another bad game. And the same goes for Jordan Mason. It was not great last week for fantasy managers. Now he's got Cleveland. Now, besides Jahmyr Gibbs, no running back has scored more than 13.1 points against Cleveland this season. They held Derrick Henry to 2.3 points back in week 2, and they held David Montgomery to 1.2 points last week. So Jordan Mason will probably be in your lineup, but I would temper expectations. At the wide receiver position, I'm starting Xavier Worthy. He looked really good last week in his return to action. 5 catches, 121 total yards, and over 17 fantasy points. Keep him active against the Jaguars. They've allowed the second most points to perimeter receivers. And remember, they gave up a combined 58.9 points to Jamar Chase and Nico Collins earlier this season. So Worthy should be in your starting lineup. And I like Chris Olave this week. Now, I get it. He had 9 points last week, but he lost points because he actually threw an interception, which is weird for a wide receiver. But look at his target share, 35%. And while his fantasy points haven't been great this season, I like him against the Giants. Their defense has given up the 2nd most points to wide receivers overall and the 6th most points to the perimeter. So start Chris Olave. Among the wide receivers that you're going to sit, and again, you probably have to play these guys, but how bad has A.J. Brown been this season? Outside of 1 game, he has scored fewer than 8 points in every single contest. His catch rate is 48% in his last 3 games, guys. That's not good. And keep in mind, he's got the Broncos and Patrick Surtain this week. So not only are his numbers bad, but the matchup is bad. So if you can fade A.J. Brown this week, I would think about doing it. Same thing for Brian Thomas Jr. I told you not to play him last week. He had 10.6 points. It was his best game of the season. He's now averaging 9 points per game. His 37.5% catch rate is awful as well. He's got the Chiefs this week. They've allowed just 2 touchdowns to perimeter receivers in their first 4 games. So Brian Thomas Jr. is a fade if you have wide receiver depth. At the tight end position, I'm going to play Sam LaPorta, and I get it. The last 3 games, he has not been good. 19.8 fantasy points on just 12 targets, but I love the matchup against Cincinnati. Their defense has allowed 2 tight ends to beat them for 13 or more points in their first 4 games, and I think the Lions are going to score a lot of points in this one, so keep the faith, start Sam LaPorta. And the same goes for Dalton Kincaid. He only had 1 catch last week, but it was a touchdown, and he scored nearly 10 fantasy points, and he's averaging 12.5 points this year. And while his snaps have gone down in 4 straight games, which I don't like, I do like the matchup against the Patriots. 3 tight ends have beaten them for 11 plus points in their first 4 games. So start Dalton Kincaid. Let's go to the tight ends who I'm sitting this week and Mark Andrews. I'm going to go to the well again. He had just 30 yards last week against the Chiefs. He's now had 30 or fewer yards in 3 of his first 4 games. His snap count dropped last week because Isaiah likely returned and Lamar Jackson is banged up. Andrews also faces Houston this week. They've allowed just 32 yards per game to tight ends this year. I'm also going to fade Hunter Henry. Now, he's been on a nice hot streak, 40.9 points in his last 2 games, but he's been targeted 3 or fewer times in 2 of those 3 games, and he's averaging just 6.5 points in 8 career games against Buffalo. And check out this stat. The Bills have allowed just 1 tight end to beat them for 11.3 or more points in the last 10 home games, so fade Hunter Henry.